You're listening to Packers Talk Network. PackersTalk.com.
Welcome to the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of PackersTalk.com network. I'm your host, Miles Teddick, joined by your co-host, Tim Hamilton. We are diehard Packers fans that just love talking about the Pack. We're not getting into all the national sports media talking points and nonsense. We're sticking to football and diving into the top topics around the Pack every week, breaking down the games during the season and sorting through all the drama and the draft and the rumors of the offseason. If y'all want to support the podcast, please spike that like button for us. Give us a follow on all the socials, but most importantly, please hop over to the YouTube channel, Packers Talk YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, little bell next to it for some bonus points. We would greatly appreciate that. That benefits us and helps us get to you. And if you really love us, share the show. Tell your friends, tell your Packer fans. We're talking Pack every Monday night, 9:30, live streaming. Y'all jump in the comments. We'll have some fun with it. Tonight, we're taking a pulse on the team. Usually we would do some in-game analysis. We're going to change it up a little bit, but is this team, are they champs or are they chumps? We're going to break this down a little bit. Tim and I might have some opposing perspectives maybe. But, I don't want to leave y'all hanging, the folks who come around for the game analysis. So here's a little bit of that. The Vikings game was trash, and the Bears still suck. All right, there's our game analysis for this week. And before we jump into it, let's get a word about our sponsor, Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packers fans. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee for direct links to specific Packers game tickets. Go to packerstalk.com/tickets or browse their website at theticketking.com. Tim, good evening, sir. How are we doing? Have you do you have like a more emotional perspective this evening still after that Vikings game, or do you think you've like calmed down and are ready to like gather it and be a little bit more rational about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think now we're a little more than 24 hours off of that game, more calm than I was watching it and going through it afterwards. It was a tough one, a game that ended up a 2-point game, but really did not feel like it was a 2-point game at any point. And just, another tough loss against a good team. And we continue to see the same things happen over and over again with the Packers in these types of games. So, yeah, I mean, I'm feeling a little clearer minded, I guess, a little better about things that were, getting further out from it. But just overall state of the team right now, it kind of just feels like we're on repeat here. And it's a lot of the same things that we talked about after the last loss to the Lions that we're going to talk about after this loss to the Vikings. So, yeah, it was a tough loss. It was a game I expected them to win. And obviously that was not the case. And never really felt like they were close to winning that game. And it's disappointing. But, it's not over. The playoffs start in a couple weeks, and who knows what can happen at that point. And, it's a tough way to go, tough loss to go through. And 0-5 now against teams with a better record than them. So I think we're finding out a lot about this team. And unfortunately, some things aren't changing, and maybe they change magically in the playoffs, but it's kind of, you are what your record says you are at this point. So I don't know, how are you feeling now, coming off of that loss, a little bit of time between it?
Man, I'm always a believer, and you and I have been doing this is episode number 75. We have talked now Packers a lot since the beginning of the 2023 season. I'm an optimistic man, I like to be optimistic about this stuff. I think it's more fun to be optimistic. I think if you're like right now, it seems to me that some group of people have been convinced that there's a reward for being first to declare losers, and first to declare someone a bum or a draft bust, or first to say we're out, we're done, season's over. And it's just like we're in the playoffs. We are in the playoffs. That's just a fact. So we can start there. If you're in the playoffs, you should play in the playoffs. No reason to get in the playoffs and not play in the playoffs. That seems silly. So I don't know. I like to be optimistic about this stuff. It was definitely a frustrating game. Make no mistake about it. We won't spend much time on the ref stuff. Yes, the offside thing was just atrocious. It is what it is. This garbage happens every week now, guys. Like, what are we going to do? My perspective on that is just don't put yourself at the mercy of the officiating. Don't do it. And they've demonstrated they're capable of that. They went in and smacked the Seahawks around in Seattle. You go off and you've won some games by multiple scores. And so, just don't make that part of the game. I think that's really what it's got to come down to. If you're LaFleur, that's what your message has to be. But at the end of the day, you have to find a way to win that game. I think it's frustrating that you don't, but I look at more like from a perspective of this is a good thing. This is still time where you can learn from things. You can afford a learning experience here. And yes, it's a super easy talking point to go, well, but they are 0-4 against the top two teams in their division. They're one finger away from being 0-5 in the division. I get it. I hear that. Context matters, though. This division's a little weird in comparison to history right now. The second best team in the division is what, 14-2? Like, are you kidding me?
It's a historic pace that they're on to have three teams with this many wins at this point in the season.
And you haven't gotten it handed to you. The first time against the Vikings, Jordan Love limps out there. All of this stuff is, to me, context matters a lot. And then what matters are the facts. And the facts are you're still in the playoffs. And at this point, the only division game that matters is the one that happens, or maybe two, in the postseason. You win those. Who cares if you got swept in the regular season? Doesn't matter. And the Packers have been on the other side of that before, where you get swept or where you do the sweeping in the regular season and you lose in the first round, or you lose after your first round bye. I don't like being on that side of it. So the hell with that. Let's have hope for being on the other side of it. The teams that come to mind for me, it's easier to talk about the 2010 season where they were the wild card and had to go on the road. Definitely see those parallels. But I think about the Giants, man, when they were wild cards and they went in and they made their way all the way up to the undefeated Patriots, and they go off and they win the Super Bowl. They did that so messy. I remember that season, the Giants going into that postseason, like games leading up to that, there were questions about Tom Coughlin's job. Like there were questions about like that team in general, and they limped into the postseason, and then they went on a run and they beat one of the best regular season teams of all time, one of Tom Brady's best teams, who now that looks even more impressive being what Tom Brady has done. So anyway, I don't want to get too distracted here.
Right.
I'm optimistic. You can't get too emotional about that loss. Yeah, it stinks. There's a lot of things you can be outraged about from the game, and certainly criticism to go around. But yeah, change your chumps, man. Like that's really what matters now, and everything else is just nonsense. So let's start with the pretenders perspective. Tim, why don't you lead us off here?
Yeah, I mean, I think to bring us back to what we're going to be talking about mostly tonight, contenders or pretenders, you sound a lot more optimistic than what I'm feeling. And I'm not trying to be negative about this team. I truly love them, and I see the potential in this team. But I can only go by what they've put on the field this season. And I don't know how many times you or I have said on this podcast, they're close. They're almost there. We can see the potential. But this is still where they are as a team. 11 wins against teams with records that are worse than theirs. And the 5 games they've played against teams that now have better records, they're 0-5. At some point, this is who you are. And we're 16 games into the season. This is who they are. Can it change in the playoffs? Maybe. But I think you look back at certain teams, those are the exceptions to what we normally see. Like, it's possible. Maybe, all the issues they've had in these games get turned around. But what they've put in front of us in these 5 games, and you can really take the Eagles game maybe out of it. That was a weird season opener, and it was a long time ago. But the 4 division games that they've lost, it's kind of the same patterns. Like, yeah, they're not getting blown off the field, but those were games they chased the entire way. The first Minnesota game, it was 28-0, 28-7 at halftime. Yeah, they got back in it, but Minnesota controlled that game. Minnesota controlled the game on Sunday. You scored 3 points in the first half. Detroit had what was it, 17-7 at halftime in the second game. Yes, you took the lead early in the fourth quarter or early in the third quarter, but then your defense couldn't get a stop. And like the first Detroit game, it was a 10-point game, but Detroit was in control of that the whole way. And there's different reasons. There's different mistakes. There was Jordan Love's injuries that he was playing through the first 2 games. I get all that. But still, at some point, you got to win one of those games. And they have not done that. And they really have never been in control of any of those games. So this is what they've put on the field. Can it change in the playoffs? Yeah, you never know. It can change. Things can come together for them. They can learn and they can make adjustments and all that. I get it. It's possible. But at this point, if you're asking me, are they a contender or a pretender? Sorry, I hate to say it. I don't want to be this person. I'm not firing anybody. I'm not, throwing guys under the bus. I'm not saying blow up the whole organization like some people are. They're just not at the level of the 3 teams that are ahead of them in the conference right now. And I wouldn't feel confident going into those games saying that the Packers can win. I think the Packers can play with any of those 3 teams, but I don't feel confident that they can do enough to win those games. And it's mistakes that the Packers are making. It's self-inflicted mistakes. And it's also you just see especially with Detroit, but we're even seeing it with Minnesota. They're just not messing up. Like, they're doing the things to win the games, right? Yeah. Like, they're not putting themselves in harm's way like the Packers are. And they're exposing the flaws that the Packers are showing you, especially defensively. I think there's just too much right now that they would need to overcome to beat these teams. So at this point, what we've seen consistently in the 5 games against the 3 teams that are ahead of them, they haven't won any. And it's like, you got to win one. Take all the injuries, the mistakes, shooting ourselves in the foot, we're beating ourselves, all that stuff. At some point, you got to win one of those games. And I know it truly matters in the playoffs. Like, you can lose them all in the regular season, you can turn around and win it in the playoffs, and that's what really matters. And nobody's going to remember the regular season if you win it in the playoffs. I'm totally understand that. I'm just looking at it right now, getting ready, one more game to get through, and then we're going to be going into the playoffs and likely seeing, the Eagles in the first round. That's one of the teams that's better than them in the NFC. What they have shown in these quote unquote big games is that they just don't measure up right now for various reasons. So, I hope it changes. I'm not rooting against anyone. I'm not trying to get anybody fired or cut from this team or anything like that. I can only go by what they're showing me. And it's not enough against the better teams right now.
So for you, it's the mistakes. That's the biggest. Like, if you're going to try to take me and convince me that they're pretenders, that's your strongest case?
It's not just the mistakes. It's consistently not coming out and getting off to a good start on offense. I think that, to me, is
a tough one. Yep.
The mistakes play into that. Like, hey, maybe they get off to a good start on offense if Josh Jacobs doesn't fumble on the first drive, right? Like, they were moving the ball. He doesn't fumble. Maybe they go down and score 7 points. Who knows?
There are certain things that change the total tone of a game, right, for sure. But we've seen, Packers have been on the good side of that too.
But the fact is, the 2 Detroit games, they scored 3 points and 7 points in the first half. The 2 Minnesota games, 7 points and 3 points in the first half. You cannot beat teams like that by scoring, a touchdown or a field goal in the first half of the game. You cannot do that. Yeah. And I know there was the pass defense was bad against Minnesota, and it was bad against Detroit. That plays into it. But for your offense to start that poorly, for your quarterback to have 64 passing yards through 3 quarters, you're not going to win in the playoffs. doing that. You're not. So yes, it's the self-inflicted mistakes, and I actually think there were fewer of them in a way against the Vikings than we've seen in some of the previous games, especially the first Detroit and Minnesota games.
Yeah.
But there's still too many, more than their opponents are making. And it's the slow starts on offense that they're getting behind. And I think the slow starts is what's going to kill them, because against the better teams, against those three better teams, they're going to expose some of the areas on defense that are weaknesses, right? We're seeing the middle of the defense, middle of the field pass defense is a problem. The depth at
It is
cornerback,
definitely a problem.
the depth at safety. And yeah, there may be some guys coming back. The lack of a pass rush is killing this team. They cannot get pressure with a 4-man rush against a good offensive line. You can do that against Seattle, New Orleans, Tennessee, the weaker teams, the Bears. They're not doing that against Detroit or Minnesota. They're sure as hell not going to do that against Philadelphia's offensive line unless something magical changes. Like, don't expect them, the 4-man rush, to get pressure. Like, they just don't have it in them this year. I'm sorry to say that. Maybe it changes. Maybe they don't consistently get pressure, but when they do, it creates a turnover or it creates a big stop on third down. Like, that's possible. But consistent pressure with the front four just hasn't been there. So offensively, you can't get off to a slow start, because I think when you play those teams in the playoffs, you're going to have to score a lot of points. You're going to have to score. I'm not saying 40, but you're going to have to score 30 or 30 plus, because I think you're going to give it up defensively the way they are right now, because they're shorthanded. And these teams offensively, Detroit, Minnesota, Philadelphia, can expose the flaws of the Packers defense.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the weaker teams can't do that. So they're going to score against you, but your offense cannot start slow and get you behind and have to play catch up the entire second half. And you need your best players on offense. Jordan Love, the receivers, like, you got to step up. And there were some balls that could have been better throws, but were catchable. They need to start making those plays.
Yeah, the Jaden Reed drop, not good.
Romeo had one.
Yep.
And you can't. Zach Tom got beat for a big sack. Like, you got to be better than that, Zach Tom. Like, I love Zach Tom. He's had a great year, but you need your best guys to be good in these big games as well. So if you're asking me, it's not one thing. The self-inflicted mistakes are big, but I think it's just your offense, and in particular your passing offense, has to play 60 minutes. They got to start. And it's Jordan Love. It's the offense. It's the game plan. It's the play caller. It's the receivers making plays. Like, it's all of it combined. So they've consistently started slow in these games, and it's gotten them behind, and it's hurt their defense. If they continue to do that, it's going to be a quick exit. And that's, to me, what the biggest thing that can help this team is starting fast offensively and putting points on the board, because then you at least can be in a shootout with the team if your defense is giving up passing yards like we've seen them. But if you're behind and you're chasing the entire game, it's going to be really tough, as we've seen, for them to come back and pull one of these games out in the fourth quarter against, Detroit, Minnesota, or Philadelphia. So a fast start on offense and getting something going, I love that they start with Jacobs and they pound them and they're setting the tone. But I think they need to kind of complement that with some easy passes for Jordan Love. Like, we don't need to throw the ball down.
Yes.
Can we dump it off sometimes to our tight ends, to Josh Jacobs, right? Like, it doesn't have to be a run. It can be. We saw it in the Seattle game. He caught a couple passes early in the game, and he did something with it after the catch. Get him in a rhythm and comfortable, right? Try to allow your receivers, your tight ends, your backs to catch the ball short and see what they can do yak-wise, but just kind of get him comfortable and a feel for the game, so he's not sitting back there getting a rush on him right away. Maybe that's kind of the rhythm that your offense can get into to start a game and to get you going. So,
all right. Well, I don't know that you've convinced me much on the Pretenders case.
Okay.
But I hear you. You're not wrong. You're not wrong about any of it. But I just think all of that is still very correctable. So we'll see what kind of leader LaFleur is here. I think this is kind of a leader crunch moment for him, or leadership crunch moment for him. He's got to set the tone for this team, and the tone that he sets after this week is going to make all the difference. You tuck your tail, you feel bad for yourself, or, you get kind of chippy and pissed off, and, go on a run. Go red, and it doesn't matter who they put in front of you. Just get out there, and they were really doing a good job being physical with teams. I don't want to get too distracted because we're still on the pretender side, but they've got it in them, I think, to overcome the things that you're laying out. And again, you're not wrong. These are definitely things that have happened against 3 teams in the NFL right now. I know it's 5 games, but it is 3 teams. So I'll put my pretenders case out there. I'll put my choke artist, my chump case out there, because I am a believer in this team in a lot of ways. I think that the other side of this conversation will be real interesting, but they're definitely, there's no doubt, one of the things about a championship team that you see at all levels, right? In high school, college, NFL, championship teams are usually the teams that make the least amount of mistakes, and they're really good at executing their game and waiting for you to make a mistake and then capitalizing off of that. The Packers are not that team right now. You can't, that's not part of their identity, right? Like, they can clean up the mistakes, but they're not the disciplined, mistake-free team that is capitalizing on other people's mistakes. So that's a big one for me. If you're not that, it's tough to overcome that to still become a champion. Not to say you can't. There's plenty of examples of championship teams that were just dominant. They physically dominant in something. And you just didn't matter if they made mistakes, they overcame them. The other thing, and this is definitely what you were, or aligned with what you were talking there at the end, is emotional play calling. LaFleur, and I've talked about this before, he's guilty of emotional play calling. And our friend Al, he's got a comment on the nose here. Abandoning the run series after Jacobs fumbled set a bad tone, and it took him a while to snap out of it.
Yeah.
He does that. LaFleur does that. He responds. And sometimes it's the opposite. It's like he feels that the situation calls to go for it on 4th down or something. And he's just like, I want you to be a little bit more calculated there.
Yeah. And this is something, no, I'm sorry. This is something we've talked about. Like, they chase the big play at times. And we've talked about that numerous times this season throughout games. I think Al's point, I hated the 3 passes in a row after the first drive. But the crazy thing about that is, if you think about it, that's part of they're still in their first 15 plays, right? Like, that's part of their script. So they were coming in kind of, you didn't know if that was your first drive, your second drive, whenever, but that was their first 15 plays.
For sure.
To go 3 passes, and they were backed up too, right? They were inside their own 20, inside their own 15 to start that drive, and you threw 3 incomplete passes. Like, it just didn't make sense. And they weren't short passes. It wasn't like they were trying to, like, hey, let's get Jordan a rhythm here. Let's get the passing game going. They were, intermediate to deep throws. It didn't make sense. And that's a preparation and game plan thing.
It is. And I think that part of the emotional play calling is it does go both ways. And there are times that coaches will talk about abandoning a script or abandoning a plan because it doesn't work, right? You set something up based on an expectation, and then you get something else. And it sounded like that's what happened. And Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur both talked about that a little bit, how they got more man than I think they expected to. And in that case, I want a calculated LaFleur to go, okay, I built this script based on this look. I'm not getting that look right now. They've totally changed this. So what I need to do is be able to pivot based on what they're giving me. I need to have some kind of beater for what I'm seeing. And that's where I'm disappointed. And again, I chalk this up to the same thing as the emotional play calling, to say, no, stick with the plan. Well, the plan's not working, dude. You gotta have the ability and the calculated mindset to go, is the plan still working? Why is the plan not working? Did something change about the plan and what we planned against? Oh, it did. Okay, maybe have an out for yourself. And I'll say this: we haven't gone this direction very often. That is, I think, where the yin and yang works so well with him and Rodgers. I think there were times that Rodgers was able to bail him out of those emotional play calls, or maybe a stubborn, like, stick to the script type of moment. and Rodgers could say, no, I know why we built the script. I know how we built the script. This moment is not built for that. We need to adjust based on what the circumstances are. I wonder if they are capable of that. Like, I know the mistakes and some of these other things that people like to point at, as far as why this team is maybe a pretender. But I think that those things are far more fixable, they just are. But something like that's how LaFleur's designed, man. Like, he needs an accountability partner almost built in to help him call these plays. And I just don't know if that person is on the coaching staff, right? Whereas Aaron Rodgers had that ability. And I'm not saying that now, panic, Jordan Love's not the guy. He's just too young. He doesn't have the ability to stand on that ground yet and the experience to say, hey, coach, look, we got to abandon the script here. Like, we've got other options. Let's use those, right? I'm seeing this. This looks familiar. This is how we beat that before. Let's go with that. And I just don't think that they've reached that level of the chess match with each other yet.
Sometimes I watch LaFleur and I watch the offense, and it's call the game for the team that you have, right? Yes. What have they been all year? They've been very good running the ball. Don't get away from that. Like, until a team stops you, there is no need to get away from that, right? Like, just call the game for the team that you have on the field with you now. And I think sometimes, I don't know if it's emotion of the moment, if it's just we see something on the film and we game plan for it all week and we want to take advantage of it. And this is what we saw during the week. And he's got to get to those calls. I don't know, but I'm with you in that it seems emotional at times. And it's just like, if something's working, why go away from it? Like, why make things more difficult? You want to make things easier for your quarterback. Give him simple throws, right? Like Sam Darnold, at least in the first half of that game, there was a lot of simple throws, right? There were some check downs. There were some easy over the middle throws. Yeah, he made some really nice ones too. And he did throw the ball, intermediate, not so much down the field, but like, in the intermediate range, 10 to 20. But as the game went on, but you see teams like establish their quarterback, establish a rhythm. And, he didn't do that for sure on Sunday against the Vikings. And I think that's been something that consistently in these type of games, like they've lacked. And they're just too quick to kind of like want to force things. And we've talked about like the deep shots that they like to take. And we saw one yesterday on the third down, and I think it was 3rd and 6. And he throws it in the double coverage down the side. Play that had no chance. And I got the chance to see the all 22 today, and it looked like nobody else was really even open.
Yeah.
But it's just like the design of that's your play call. Like, I don't know, just make it easier on your offense, make it easier on your quarterback.
Well, I'll have to go back and get a closer look and look at the all 22 to say this definitively. But what it feels like to me was a very much stick to the plan kind of moment. And no shade at Bo Melton, but you're no Christian Watson, right? I mean, fans can have their debates, and I see you, R. Showers. I see Mr. Glass. I got you, but the guy is important, all right? We can decide whether or not we think he's receiver 1. The defenses think he's receiver 1. They treat him like receiver 1. Like the double coverage you used to see Devontae Adams get, that's what Christian Watson gets now. He's always got a safety over the top of him and somebody underneath. That's bracket coverage. He's always got that. There's times he's taken 4 guys away from the play. 3, I mean, usually it's 2 guys, sometimes 3, and I've seen 4. And that's where, when you don't have that in the offense, you need to account for that and design differently. You need to go back to the plan and say, look, we can't account for maybe 2 to 3 guys to stay off to this side, to open this up underneath the way that we would without, with Christian Watson in there. You just have to accept that. Now, the other thing is, I'm a little disappointed that they're not using Luke Musgrave a little bit more in that way. It seems like they're being pretty conservative with him as well. I'd love it if both of them could get to full health, and then you've got two freaks on the field at the same time. And now you're talking about a lot of fun. There's a lot you can do with that. And LaFleur will. He knows he will. The problem is we're not seeing him adjust when he doesn't have that. And we even saw this before when Rodgers was with the offense for that 1 year. When Christian Watson was in and healthy, it worked, man. There were some fun moments. But when he wasn't, it was broken. It stunk. It was gross because LaFleur's system needs that kind of that gravitational pull from somebody. All right. So we've gotten kind of far into this thing. I don't want to lose time to talk about the contenders case because that deserves its due. You lead us off there, Tim. I know where you lean on the argument, but there's definitely some evidence here that they are still contenders, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they have the talent. We've seen the talent flash. Even in these games that they've lost, we've seen the talent and the ability to go toe-to-toe. And I have no doubt that they can go toe-to-toe with any team in the NFL. It's just, can they finish the job, right? And we've already talked about all the issues with it. But they're not far off. So can they cut out the self-inflicted mistakes, the penalties, the turnovers? We've seen them improve. Red zone was an issue the first half of the year, right? They struggled mightily scoring touchdowns in the red zone. Since the bye week, that's flipped. They're one of the best teams in the league. I think they were second in the league since the bye week coming in the Sunday's games, scoring touchdowns in the red zone. So they've at least proven one area where they can get better at. The run defense has gotten better. There's another area of improvement. I think the penalties have gotten better. There's still too many at key times, but the overall number of penalties, the overall number of times that they are drastically hurt by penalties like they were early in the year, they've cut down on that. So yes, there's definite areas of improvement from this team. So they've shown it. Can they improve with the slow starts on offense and a lack of consistency in the passing game? And can their defense give them, I don't want to say a pass rush because I just don't think it's going to be there consistently, but can they give them a key moments pass rush that creates a turnover or creates a third down stop to get the ball back to your offense? Can the pass defense improve with hopefully getting Evan Williams back? We're not going to count on Jair, but Quay Walker hopefully coming back in the playoffs. Can that improve middle of the field pass defense? So there's areas they've improved throughout the year. There's still a lot more of improvement to be made, but it's possible. It's possible for them to get there. So that to me is the place where you look at and you say, okay, they have the pieces. Now, can they finally put it together without shooting themselves in the damn foot? And can they start faster and play a more complete game? That's where I look at and say, that's your hope. That's where you need to see it. Yeah. But it is, it's there. We see the talent. And part of that's going to be health. You mentioned Christian Watson, getting him back changes the offense. And I think he, from everything we hear, it's a bone bruise. It's not something serious. I don't expect them to play against the Bears, but I expect them to play the first playoff game and be ready to go. So that's a difference maker. But, they need playmakers, whether it's Watson, other receivers to step up. They have to start catching the ball. They didn't do a good job beating man coverage against Minnesota. So that's on film. I would expect them to see more man coverage, whoever they play in the playoffs. They're going to see that on film. So you need it in the offense, particularly in the passing game, and you need your quarterback to play better. I'm not trying to knock Jordan Love, but 64 yards passing through three quarters ain't going to get it done in a playoff game, right? You need to see him be a more accurate quarterback, be a better playmaker, get out. If guys are initially covered up, get outside the pocket, try to make something happen off script. So to me, the reason for optimism is it's there. We've seen improvement in other areas. Now, can they still improve in the areas that are holding them back? That's my hope. That's where I'm kind of it's close still. And I have no doubt that they can go up against these contenders. The other teams aren't blowing them off the field.
No.
They're hanging with them. Now, can they improve on the areas that have hurt them in these 5 games and get better and, come out on the winning end? It's possible. But we've seen him, we've seen him make improvements. So there's a lot more to go, but that's where I go for what has to change, what has to flip for this team.
Well, I'll say this because I definitely, again, I'm optimistic. And real quick, guys, if you're listening, please jump over to the Packers Talk YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell next to it for bonus points. We love you. Thank you. Contenders case. And man, there are just certain qualities about this 2024 Packers team that I have fallen in love with. This team never quits, ever. The one finger to block a field goal so that you're not all defeated in the division right now is a great example of it. Thank you, Carl Brooks. This team doesn't quit, man. And it's so much fun. If you recognize that, if you really see that, that is rare. It's rare because these players in the NFL are not dumb. They're aware of the game just the way we are. They can understand if they've got a chance to win or not. And a lot of them, it's hard to emotionally not just check out and be like, well, we lost. We got a minute left. It would take a miracle to win. To hell with it. You can see that. You can feel it. This team has none of that in them. Not at all. And it's amazing. It's definitely, I would say, something you cannot coach. You might be able to build a culture that breeds that, but I don't think you can just like coach that into somebody. That's a huge piece. Huge.
They faced adversity, and that's part of it. I mean,
a lot of adversity, not just once. It's been adversity all season long.
Started the season with it. Malik Willis came in for 2 weeks. He'd been there, and he had to start a game for you. And played 2.5 games. He won all those games. So
yeah,
there's adversity you faced throughout the season. Like right there, that would have sunk a lot of teams. And even these games where they've gotten behind against Detroit, Minnesota, there's games. Yes, yesterday was one where could have kind of packed it in there, and they didn't. They came back. Like, okay, game didn't feel like it was a 2-point game, but you never you didn't get blown off the field. You didn't. I know we're talking about professional teams here, but there are cases where teams get down and they kind of it never gets close. You never see the fight in them. The Packers show that fight and make it a game. So the adversity, the will to never give up. Your quarterback, who no matter what he does, is never rattled. We saw some awful interceptions early this year, right? He never got rattled. He just comes back and slings it. And I think that's a great quality to have.
Absolutely. It's incredibly rare. We don't get to see this a lot. And again, it's kind of because, look, they're adults. They see it. Like, look, yeah, we're losing. It's hard to just get over that and move on. They're supposed to, obviously. Coaches' jobs are obviously, play, ignore the scoreboard, all that. But again, they're humans. This team never quits. That is a huge, huge thing. You cannot ignore that. The next thing I would say, they have strengths in the areas that matter. And it's so funny because the receiver debate is fired up right now. Oh, if only they had an elite receiver. Only they had a receiver one. If only they had. Well, look, let's go down the list of elite receivers, shall we? Let's just talk about who they could have and how many rings those guys have, since those guys are the key to winning rings. Jamar Chase, how many rings he got? No rings. Justin Jefferson, how many rings no rings there. How about AJ Brown? Does he have any rings? He's got no rings. DK Metcalf, no rings. Throw some others at me. Who we got? Puka Nacua, no rings. Who else we got here? I mean, if you want to go back into other days, like the olden days, let's just talk about the top of the all-time receiver list, right? Obviously, there's Jerry. I mean, dude's the GOAT, indisputable GOAT. Did it with multiple teams. I mean, it didn't win championships with multiple teams, but made it to the Super Bowl with the Raiders. But dude's the undisputed GOAT. What about after that? Randy Moss, 0 rings. What about after that? T.O., 0 rings. What about after that? Like, just keep going down the list. You get down to guys like Julian Edelman. He has 3 rings. A guy like MVS is running around with 2 rings right now. If elite receivers are the key to winning championships, The data just doesn't support it. Larry Fitzgerald, Tim Brown, Julio Jones, Chris Carter, Marvin Harrison has the one. DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Johnson, maybe the most physically gifted receiver in the game, the history of the game. No rings. Andre Johnson, no rings. Like, guys, if the key to winning rings is elite receivers, show me. I mean, my goodness, who's Pat Mahomes throwing to? Tyreek Hill's gone. I mean, are we like imagining he still has him there? Like, he's got Rashee Rice and he's got MVS, and I don't even know who's there right now. Like, if it's elite receivers that you need, show me the proof of that. It's not there. But I mean, Randy Moss in the greatest receiver or season the receiver has ever had with the greatest quarterback in the history of the game didn't win the Super Bowl.
True. And I agree with you. But the receivers they have to play better.
For sure. Yes. But
I'm with you.
The constant argument of, well, if only we had this magical first round receiver that somehow is off winning Super Bowls for everybody else except us. I mean, the list of elite receivers here in this game and today, guys I didn't mention before, Garrett Wilson, CeeDee Lamb. I mean, none of these guys. St. Brown still doesn't have a ring yet, right? It's pretty good on a great team. No rings. Keenan Allen, no rings. Stephon Diggs, no rings. It just, if it's an elite receiver you need, I'm not seeing the evidence that unlocks the rings. So I just wish we could get beyond this whole like putting Jaden Reed's drop under a microscope and saying, well, if only we had an elite receiver, or saying, well, Christian Watson's injured. Well, if only we had an elite receiver. Well, Dobbs dropped a ball. It's like, look, we have an amazing group of receivers right now. And when they're playing at their best, which we've seen, it's spectacular. It's so much fun to watch. And all of you who are quick to say, well, if only we had, you guys are the first ones to jump up and celebrate when Jaden Reed, Dobbs, and Watson, and Wicks, all these guys are doing something in a game. So we can't have it both ways. And I think we need to leave this receiver debate alone, because you know what the data shows? The data shows that a strong defense and a strong running game wins championships. Like, that's consistent. You can see that throughout the history of the game. Strong defenses, top 10 defenses, and strong running games win Super Bowls. Why did the Packers win a Super Bowl in 2010? Because James Starks, right? Aaron Rodgers was great. Jordy Nelson was great. James Starks ran over defenses in a way that nobody expected the Packers to be able to run over defenses, because he didn't get healthy until like week 17. And up until that point, it was a roundabout running back room that was not good. I mean, he was a 7th round rookie, and he started in the playoffs. Like, it was not a good running back room. But over that 4 games, he was the best in the league. And they had a top 10 defense.
He was a spark they needed. And he was a complement to the passing game that they needed, for sure.
You have to be able to run the ball, and you have to be able to stop the opposing offense. You have to have a top 10 defense, essentially. The Packers, I don't know if they have a top 10 defense right now, but they sure as hell can run the ball, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so those are my 2 big contender points there. Is that, they never quit, and they've got 2 things that really matter in the postseason: a rushing offense and a good defense that could get even better. We've also seen their play callers win chess matches. You have to win the chess match. That's a big deal in crunch time. We've seen that. Not always, but we have seen it. And we've seen LaFleur be a good leader. He has strong leadership ability. Right now is a leadership moment for him. Like I said, how will he respond? We don't know. I felt like this last season too. It was a strong leadership moment for him. How he responded could have made or break his career with the Packers, I felt. And we kind of agreed on that at the beginning of the 2023 season. And now it's in a totally different place. So I just feel like the foundation of a championship team is there. They have the parts. And when you are healthy, you have special pieces that are unique and are very difficult for other teams to beat you with. Like, if you've got a healthy Watson and a healthy Musgrave on the field, that offense is going to open up for the other guys. And then on the other side, you get Jair back, you get Quay back. The pass defense probably shores up a little bit, enough to matter. But anyway, so that's my contender case.
So.
How'd I do, man? Because I know where you're at. Are you still where you started?
Yeah.
Are they still pretenders?
To me, yeah. I hate to say it, and I hate to be the one with the negative outlook, but I can only go by. No, I can only go by what I see. I know that there's a potential there for them to improve. Getting guys back from injury will help. The one I'll debate you on is Jair ain't coming back. He's played his last season.
And I will debate you on that, but we'll have to do that on a different episode.
I don't think he's coming back this year.
I think he's coming back. It'll be all right.
And I don't think he's playing another down for the Packers in his career. But that's for another day. So, yeah, getting certain guys back will definitely help. And the potential is there. We just haven't seen it in these games. And I can't get beyond that. I want to, and I want to be a believer, and I want to see them as a contender. I know they can go toe-to-toe with these teams, but they can go toe-to-toe, but they can't come out on top so far. And I hope that changes. And I'll be the first one to come on here and say, I'm an idiot. I was wrong. Like, I'll call myself out. And you all can make fun of me in the comments.
We keep receipts on this show.
Yeah, keep the receipts. God, I hope I'm wrong in 2 weeks and we can come back on and be like, man, they just kicked the Eagles' ass. Like, that was awesome. And,
stranger things.
Right. It's possible. But going based on what we're seeing now up to this point against the 3 teams that are ahead of them, they're just not on their level right now. So let's hope they can get there and improve the things they need to improve on, because we have seen some improvement in this team. We have seen some development in this team throughout the season. There's more, though, that's still needed to overcome it and to come out on top and win these games that they haven't been winning.
Well, that's the good news, and that's where I'll agree to disagree with you. I think that they are still contenders because they have shown the ability to improve throughout the season. I think that they will continue to do that. I think this week was a huge learning opportunity, and I don't think it's going to be wasted. And they could afford it. They're in the playoffs. Anything's possible. So I don't know. Maybe I can convince some of you guys to believe that they're contenders, they're champs, they're not chumps. Maybe Tim gave you guys what you needed to go the other way to say, nope, they can't do it. Who knows? You guys let us know in the comments. But thank y'all so much for hanging out with us this week on the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of PackersTalk.com network. Y'all jump over to the Packers Talk YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button for us. Hit that little bell next to it for bonus points. We love that. We greatly appreciate it. And spike that like button for us if y'all enjoyed this episode. And as always, we will see y'all next week, Packers fans. Go